Good morning, and thank you for joining us today for the webinar, Escape the Scripts of HP UFT. I'm Mark Beebe, Marketing Campaign Manager for Worksoft, and your host for today's session. First, a couple of logistical points. We do have a large number of people on the call today, so the lines will be muted, but we will take questions toward the end of this 60-minute broadcast. Please use the question feature to submit questions at any time during the webinar. For questions that we can't get to during the Q&A session, we'll be sure to get back to you with an email reply. We will also make a link to the recording of this webinar available for registrants who are unable to make it, or perhaps for colleagues you think might benefit from the material. Let me now introduce our speakers. We are privileged to have Chris Kraus and Rick Thorne with us today. Chris is Worksoft's Director of Product Management for Certify and an expert in the field of test automation. Chris holds patents in service virtualization and testing technologies. During his world travels, he has managed to combine his passions for photography and yoga practice. Over the past 25 years, he has served in a wide variety of engineering and product management roles, including most recently for CA Technologies. Today, Chris is responsible for the strategic direction of Worksoft's flagship products, Worksoft Certify and Worksoft Analyze. Rick is Worksoft's Director of Education and Partner Enablement, responsible for providing education, training, and enablement services to Worksoft customers and partners. He has worked at Worksoft for over 10 years in a variety of leadership roles. It's great to have both of you with us today, and without further ado, let me turn it over to Chris.
Well, thank you very much, Mark. So this is Chris Kraus. I'm the product manager for Certify, and I'm going to talk to you about this UFT replacement program. We'll start out with why would you actually want to migrate technologies, and why would you want to do that now? Why would Worksoft actually be your best solution for that? And then Rick is going to give you some more details about the UFT replacement program and how it works. So to start, let's talk about what's the trouble with script-based testing. Well, you might guess from the picture, what's the big problem with this picture? Coverage, right? That's the big problem people have. So if you think about the way you've been implementing testing for years, you've probably built a lot of manual scripts, you've built a lot of automated scripts, but you're probably not pleased with the amount of coverage you have. And this is through no fault of QA not desiring to do better. It's just there's some flaws with script-based testing that can be resolved. There are better ways. So if we think about the way we're running our business now and the way we're testing, how can we solve the problem with coverage? So why do we not have good coverage itself? So what are some of the top reasons why script-based testing, especially for SAP tests, break? You may think, wow, I'm running, simple finance or materials management or warehouse management in SAP. Doesn't everybody run SAP the same way? Well, no. There's some very specific reasons why, you just can't write your program or your script once and keep leveraging over and over again. One is people actually do customization. There's people customize, they create what are called Z transactions because they want a different view on top of a transaction or maybe a persona. There's configuration changes to the standard business process. As we know, governments enact new regulations, so those new regulations turn into changes in the business process, and so you're actually having to customize your SAP system and your workflows with them themselves. On the other side, SAP is doing a much better job these days of providing new features as updates. So when you take a service pack, maybe it's a small one, maybe it's a very large one, you could actually get some new features and workflows and fields there. Okay? And what's really interesting is when our customers, when I talk to them, I find out that no one's world is a single application in SAP or a single module. Even if they have sales and distribution, warehouse management, materials management, they may actually interact with other things like transportation management, sales orders from the web. So a lot of their end-to-end testing and the way they look at validating their end-to-end business process is some SAP modules, some custom stuff, and other applications like Manhattan, and maybe it's stuff on the mainframe or AS400 or Workday or Salesforce, right? So the big problem is we can't say our applications are static. Our end-to-end business processes change. We modify them to make them better for us. We have regulations that change. So if you're writing programs to test programs, all of a sudden you can end up with a program with defects in it, or you're always fixing those scripts in those programs themselves. So my assertion to you is there's actually a better way to do that. With Worksoft, we think that there's a much better way to approach testing. One is you shouldn't have to be a developer to write a test harness to test a program. Anybody should be able to do that, right? We want to democratize testing. Let business analysts, like end users, actually contribute to the process. So we look at this as kind of three areas. One is Worksoft Analyze, which actually lets you discover and visualize your actual business processes and how they're being used. One flaw we find is people say, well, the business analyst in the back office thinks this is how we do warehouse management. But in reality, it's different based on the country you're in. You know, warehouse management in China, in India, Mexico, and the U.S. is different. So we want to use Analyze to actually discover the real as-is business process. So we go do the automation. We do automate the right things. We're testing the end-to-end processes the actual end users are using. The other thing is we can then use Certify to actually do the testing. Now the trick is we are not a scripting tool. We're a object action framework, so we can actually allow you to visually author and work with options and actions in the UI. So you don't have to be a developer to use our tool. It's very nice. The other thing is we can actually help you with some risk-based testing specific in SAP. Our impact analysis will tell you based on a transport which of our certified processes should actually run to optimize your code coverage, right? So you've actually test more of your transactions and then think about your end-to-end business processes. Because remember, you just don't want to test atomic transactions. It has to be that end-to-end business process that keeps your company running. The last thing is how do we actually operationalize that? So if you're running, say, a traditional waterfall approach, you want to run your test and quality center, or maybe you're more of an agile shop, you're looking at continuous delivery, Jenkins build, Team City, Team Foundation Center, and you need to do your lights out testing as part of your build process, we support that also. The cool thing is we can actually allow you to do elastic demand of running tests in parallel to support those very operational needs itself. So what does a business process look like? So with our Analyze product, the nice thing is we can see a graphical representation of a business process. So this is unique to Worksoft. What we find is when you have hundreds of tests in the library and there are thousands of lines of code, it's hard to understand actually what you're testing, what you're doing. So what we can actually do with our Analyze product is actually help you visualize the actual process, say the end-to-end process. So ideally, if this is one end-to-end process, and then this is a second process here, what we do when we visualize things is we can tell you had a sales order. If you know and love SAP like me, you know VA1 is a sales order. We've actually seen 3 variants of that sales order. So there's 3 different types of sales orders coming into the system. Now they all work together and come to a reusable component, DLO1N1 here. So the nice thing is, when we talk about visualizing the process, we're not saying, hey, go read some code and get mad because you don't like the way someone wrote their code. We're saying eyes on the glass. Look at the visual process, understand the flows. Now, what's interesting about this is we basically use our technology and we observe the QTP or UFT test running, and we created this automatically. So we're giving you an end-to-end view of the business and variations in the sales order process. Now, the nice thing is, if I drill down into this specific transaction here, okay, there was actually more than one observation here. There was actually 3 sales orders that occurred. So what we've done is we've said, oh, you've actually done this exact sales order with the same fields, maybe different data because it's a data-driven test, but you've done it over and over again. So you don't actually need 3 discrete tests. We've combined them or deduped them, so we said this sales order, I didn't use these screens, and then you can walk through to the next one. So what we've done with Analyze is we've given you a very elegant end-to-end visualization. We help you identify variations in those processes and shared components, but also we've deduped them. So I could have run, say, 80 UFT tests here, but in reality, they've consolidated down to this beautiful graphical view and gotten rid of duplicates so I can understand maybe I've always been meaning to write data-driven tests, but I've never done it, but now I could actually do that. So the other thing that people have a problem with when they write scripts is actually, like, what is this test doing? I see if, then, else code, set statements, X path divs, blah, blah, blah. But in reality, what do you really need? You need very high fidelity documentation of that. So because we observe these QTP tests running when we want to convert them, our GenDoc capabilities actually allows you to visually see the pages and each field you've interacted with. And we'll tell you the nice details of the data, but also the SAP field names and that. So if you're actually looking to a business analyst and saying, hey, this is what we've documented in this process to be, they're going to say, this is awesome. I have now solved my Sarbanes-Oxley auditing purposes for compliance, right? I now have a great document to share with auditors of this is what we were testing. This is how we tested the system. There's no guessing. There's no reading of scripts and so forth. So a great way to think about your process and get a little bit more into it. So now I've shown you the pretty pictures. How does this actually turn into an actionable test? So for us, of course, I love Certify, and it's an amazing product. We were first to market and really identified the object action framework. So if you can see here, this is not a scary test. This is literally a series of human readable steps and processes. When we generate those tests, for example, we have that VAO1 and VAO of sub 1 and sub 2. So we had 3 versions of my sales order. Those have actually generated into 3 versions of your orders here. Now we've automatically parameterized those into sub-processes because we really want to encourage reusage of sub-processes. The idea is this is going to dramatically lower your maintenance of your scripts because when we generate them, we will generate, say, here's the sales order 2 and all the steps, and then this is the reusable VLO1 in 1 process. So everybody leverages that same process. We enjoy the nice, easy-to-read human words here. This is literally the test. And they're going to look similar to the documentation. We're providing the information in a human-readable way. What was the field, what was the data, and what happened, okay? So what we see here is we've auto-generated tests, but they're not bad tests. They're actually pretty elegant. We've identified a main end-to-end business process. We have automatically created sub-processes for those. Things that are reusable can then be joined there. So the idea is we want to get rid of duplicates, and we want to actually have highly reusable code. So when we generate them, we actually do this for you automatically. Okay. So why should we look at Worksoft Certify for this? Because it is the right solution for enterprise applications and end-to-end validation. Okay. It is actually purpose-built and architected for end-to-end business process validation because we understand your sales order may go across multiple applications. There could be multiple SAP modules, maybe some custom stuff on web, okay? And so we know that we can actually do this. Now the nice thing is it's very collaborative. If we have these, if you run your processes, we'll observe them, we'll generate these. That way you can give documentation to, say, your Office of Project Management, your business analysts, they can see these, they can say approve, yes, these are the business processes, we know them, maybe we need to make a little modification to them. So in other words, we're going to give you much more time to value because we're actually generating this stuff. It's not being done by hand. We've done this with multiple customers. Now the trick is we're seeing 60-80% reduction in the overall testing project is ongoing maintenance costs because we're purposely deduping them. We're actually finding reusable components and leveraging them. So your number of test assets you have to maintain is dramatically smaller, and the object action framework is much easier to maintain than actually working with code. I mean, to prove that, over on IT Central, one of our customers said, because there's no syntax involved with Worksoft Certify, the process and actions are more like executable documentation, making maintenance much easier. Notice they didn't say, I spent 4 years in college learning how to program so that then I can pick up a tool and start programming some more. So really the business friendliness of the tool is it's scriptless, object action framework. The tests are built using simple narratives that explain the activity. All test sets are stored in a central relational repository, so it's very easy to leverage and change. You can see if I've got a reasonable subprocess, how many people are leveraging it, and find those. So it's just much easier to edit and work with our tests themselves. So at this point, I'm very pleased to pass over to Rick Thorne, and Rick's going to walk you through the replacement program for SAP itself.
Perfect, thank you. really excited about the way that we've been able to combine the products that Chris is talking about in order to use the software to quickly and easily convert your existing UFT libraries into Worksoft certified tests, which does in fact improve the testing and reduce the maintenance like Chris talked about. So you're really, the customer effort to migrate these tests is very small. All you have to do is make sure your UFT tests are working effectively. And then we will use the component of both certify and analyze called capture, which effectively records what those tests are doing while it's executed in order to capture them into analyze to produce those pretty diagrams that Chris showed you and the test steps that will be put into analyze, as well as the documentation of the business process that was captured. The long tests that are end-to-end in UFT tend to present a challenge a lot of times when you're trying to do a conversion, because you're not sure exactly where the test breaks should occur in order to create modularization, in order to take advantage of the reusability of the components that Chris was describing a little while ago too. So Analyze automatically shows you that. It automatically gives you that visualization. The result is that you have a new end-to-end business process focus with a really dramatic reduction in the number of assets. He talked about reducing them, but our experience has shown that we reduce them anywhere from 60 to 80%. The fact is that when people have automated with UFT, traditionally they automate what was done manually. When you test manually, you create a test for every single occurrence of a particular type of activity. So if I have 16 different types of sales orders in 3 different regions, I'm going to have that many individual tests. If I just automate those, I have a faster generation of the results, but I don't have any real gain in terms of productivity. With Certify, by deduping, as Chris called it a little while ago, identifying where you have truly only unique instances of individual tests and showing those up in the asset database, you end up with that reduction that we're talking about. So rationalize, that's the dedupe process that we talked about, and then automate. How we do that is by using Analyze to discover the processes. You know, right-click, begin capture, execute your UFT test. At the end, right-click and capture. It now automatically shows up in Analyze. You can see visually exactly the diagrams that Chris showed you, what the unique occurrences of different variants of a particular transaction are, or a unique variant of the business process flow. So if you have 23 different versions of end-to-ends, you might discover when you run those through Analyze that there's only really 14 unique paths that are being represented. Analyze shows you that automatically, so you don't have to do any work in order to figure that out. It's done for you. After we've done the analysis, then those test steps and documentations are automatically generated by Analyze so that we can create the PDF documents, and we can also import those test steps for executing the same exact test that you just ran in UFT now in Certify. All that's necessary is to apply variabilization, record sets in order to do the data-driven testing that Chris was talking about, and some places assemble end-to-end flows from unit tests where you had individual unit tests that you can now see would connect better into a process flow. After we've done that completion of that migration, then we just want to validate that the tests will run without having somebody attend to them or do any intervention. And so we execute those, and then they turn them over to you to be able to use in your normal run cycle. So we're leveraging Analyze to capture those scripts. We visualize it in Analyze, we export it into Certify, and we turn all those scripts then into complete business process documents. There are a number of places where you'll discover as you go through this, and we'll show you actually by doing it for you, where you can apply the same test in multiple places. Now, traditionally, when you apply the same test in different places, you copy it and use the copy. We don't do that. We actually call it. We execute that same instance of that subtest, that subcomponent, if you will, so that you only have to maintain it in one place. You don't have to go find all of its occurrences and make changes as changes occur in your underlying system. That makes the tests extremely resilient to change. And then it also enables a maximum coverage with a minimum number of assets. And that's the whole idea. We want to be, while we're significantly reducing the number of assets that you're having to maintain in the future, we want to make sure that the coverage is either the same or better than it was before. The run phase is actually, the first bullet is the only one we're actually doing as part of the program, where we're using Worksoft Execution Manager, which is our scheduling tool, in order to make sure that these tests reliably run in a lights out mode. That is, nobody has to intervene at all while they're executed. Once we've done that and we've validated that they can be used in an unattended test execution mode, you can then attach them to your test management environment. Typically, if you've got UFT, you're using HP ALM. The ALM program is then putting those into test labs, and you're running those from those test folders. Using Certify then as the execution engine, the results are returned back to ALM, just like the results were for your manual and UFT tests, so that you now have all of your results in one place. The same integration is available for Solution Manager for those people that are transitioning into Solution Manager as their test automation framework and test management platform. We do the same thing there. Then you just go ahead and run them as often as you need, daily, weekly, monthly. Use Certify Impact, as Chris was talking about earlier, to analyze transports which contain the changes that are being promoted into your SAP system, and discover automatically for you which unique end-to-end business process tests in your Certify test library should be executed automatically for you, to determine that not only did those changes in those transports get implemented effectively, but they didn't cause changes upstream or downstream in your business application that would cause a breakage. You know that now before you promote that transport by doing impact analysis and running your regression more often. So use that as part of your continuous integration or continuous delivery environment in order to keep your changes up to date. We're finding accelerated adoption of change in our customer's environment with fewer interruptions of service to the customer and to the employee and to the vendor that are using those applications. Use Worksoft Impact, that the way I described it, that gives you a target for risk-based testing that does that automatically for you, and from now on, you're change fearlessly. So how long does it take? We run pilot programs regularly for 4 weeks or less, okay? It's very simple. We scope it, make sure that those tests run, scoping and making sure the test run is an interactive activity between us and you, making sure that we've selected the right tests and you've selected the ones that you really want, and that they actually work when you run them in UFT. Then we configure our software that we're going to be using, Analyze, Worksoft, Certify, Worksoft Execution Manager, make sure that those are up and running, and start capturing as you execute your tests. Look to see what the answers are in the discovery phase inside of Analyze, where is our duplication taking place, etc. The automation is fairly minimal, in that what we're going to do is go ahead and apply the variabilization and the record sets to those tests, make sure that they run particularly well for you in the run environment, and then turn them back over to you. All of that's done in a 4-week period or less for 150 individual UFT scripts. That's not to imply that if you had 300 it would take twice as long, because obviously there's some economies that we can derive when we do this process. So if you have a different size pilot that you want to run, just contact us and we'll get with you and figure out exactly what the process looks. Process is the same, but exactly how long each step will take in order to give you an estimate of what the timing will be. So we have a couple of case studies that we'd like to just give you some examples of. This isn't something we just made up and thought, gee, let's try this. We've actually done it. One of the federal agencies we did it with converted over 2,500 QTP scripts, now UFT, into Worksoft certified tests that resulted in 300 processes that did the same work. Okay, the test execution time that it took them to do those QTP tests was a couple of weeks. It's now a couple of hours. We've done it in a couple of other places. These examples from a couple of other places we've done it too. A major U.S. electric utility was able to achieve 67% reduction. They went from 600 individual tests to 200 and certify. Global oil company reduced their individual tests 81% and their end-to-end tests by 40% with identical business coverage as to what they had before. Very exciting results. So we reduce the maintenance costs. How do we do that? There's three ways we reduce maintenance costs. One, you stop paying maintenance on something you're no longer needing to use. Two, you have fewer assets to maintain. Three, the object action paradigm that Chris described to you a little while ago is so much easier to use than programming, that your ease of maintenance is tremendous, and the savings from that alone is great. Now, you also end up with improved test coverage because now you have these reusable components that you can use in different areas. You also have all the parameterization done for you to take full advantage of data-driven testing so that you can change the way it's run. So I can run those same tests with minor modifications in the different business units and the different geographical areas that my company does business. So let's get started. Contact us at info@worksoft.com. We'll give you whatever information you need in order to help you get started with this program. And don't forget, we're going to be at Sapphire with you. So if you're going to be at Sapphire, make sure you come by our booth, number 738. Join us there. It's a very nice, open, welcoming environment. You can see demonstrations. There's a meeting area in the booth as well. We have some breakout meeting areas on the floor for individual discussions. You can get all your questions answered. You can get demonstrations of the product, and there will be experts there to talk to you about this and other programs that Worksoft gives you. Okay? So with that, I'll open it up for questions, and Chris and I will be glad to take your questions. Mark?
All right, thank you, Rick, and thank you, Chris. And now we will take your questions. As a reminder, you can use the question feature at any time to submit questions. You can direct them either to Rick, to Chris, or to both of them. Our first question, how is Worksoft Analyze different from SAP BPCA? Will the end-to-end process flow be documented automatically based on the end-to-end usage? And if yes, what are the prerequisites?
Yes, so it's different because BPCA relies on a blueprint. And one of the problems is getting current and up-to-date blueprints, because every time you run a transport, you change your processes or add new Z-transactions, you need to go update your blueprints. What you can actually do is discover those actual business processes with Analyze. We can do it through some historical records called process mining, or we can actually do it by observing real users with our interactive or passive capture. And then we will actually document your actual end-to-end processes. Now, what happens is you can actually generate a blueprint from that. So then you can enable the usage of BPCA for change management and things later. And that's something we'll actually be demoing at the booth in Sapphire. So if you think of Analyze as a way to document all of your processes, whether it's in Salesforce or other applications in SAP, but we do have the ability to generate blueprints in SAP and create your object library and your actually objects there.
Okay, our next question. We have UFT tests that are data-driven. So as an example, ensure a material is added to an order by checking it in an order. Can the UFT to Worksoft migration process determine the validation done by our UFT scripts? And Rick, that'd be a great one for you, I think.
Yes, absolutely. We'll notice where there was an expected value and what that value was when that was captured. And when we do what I call the variabilization and the parameterization of that, we will assign a variable to that, which it then attaches to what we call a record set, which is essentially like a spreadsheet with expected values. And we read the expected values and compare what we actually find to the expected values and tell you whether or not it matched.
So there's a way to change checkpoints in QTP over to validation steps and certify.
Exactly correct.
Great.
Okay, and we have some great questions coming in. As a reminder, you can use the question feature at any time to submit questions to us. The next question, we've had a couple along this line. How does Analyze remove duplicates? How exactly are test cases reduced?
Okay, Analyze, it's pretty amazing. What happens is we see, say you go to VAO1, sales order. You go to your first window and you put OR, order type, a distribution center, or channel. We know you've interacted with 3 fields, and then you go to your next window and you would put your ship to, your sold to parties, and a line item. So what happens is we understand as you go in a transaction from window to window what fields you've interacted with, and we call that a signature. And then when we go put a new observation into Analyze, we say, okay, does this signature exist already? Great, this is a duplicate transaction, so it's the same fields, the same windows, just different data. So in the screenshot I showed you where there was 3 observations of the same VAOM, that's how we do it. So we're actually doing it by signature identification. So that means we have a little bit of magic. We understand how windows and objects work and SAP GUI, and we do the same thing for, say, Salesforce. We can do, understand how when you're interacting with things there. So it's just part of our native capabilities to understand what your actual business processes are, not document, and then give you consolidation of those so you understand, your core one. One thing you can do with Analyze is you can overlay your STO3 data. So if you're familiar with SAP, STO3 is your use count data. So you can see if you've replicated that down, how often those transactions are used in production, or if you have multiple users capturing those, we'll give you a capture count there also. So you can kind of find your hot spots and what's most important.
Okay, does Worksoft support portal applications like SRM and Ariba?
Yes, absolutely. So we support all versions of SAP through all UIs and the other applications that your clients are using or that you're using in your customer environment today. The UFT conversion program, though, is limited to SAP GUI transactions only at this time. However, generating test assets with Worksoft Capture and with Worksoft Certify can be done on virtually any of your program applications that you're using in your company today.
Okay, our next question. You mentioned Worksoft Execution Manager. What is that?
Okay. So Execution Manager is actually kind of interesting. What we find is you kind of have a life cycle. Hey, I've started building automation. I've now got 5 tests, 100 tests, 500 tests. But I need to actually go run these. But I don't want human beings, say, go into Quality Center and say, go run this, please. Build me a test lab and kick them off by hand. What people want is they want them to be run on a schedule. So they run this every Friday night. And I want to run the tests in parallel because if I've written 500 tests, the nice thing is when a certified process reruns the test, we run it dramatically faster because the software is doing it. So the wall clock of, say, a 10-minute test would take you 2 minutes to rerun. But if I want to make sure that I, say, vet my entire end-to-end process in 2 hours, I may need to run the 500 or 1,000 tests in parallel. So Execution Manager lets you schedule the tests, determine how you want to run them in parallel, and then we remote into your test lab and dynamically connect to your machines, log in, run the tests, capture all your screens, and then bring them back. So we actually do a lot of management of like your hardware. So there's no worries of someone locked the screen on the test machine so my screenshots don't work and things like that. We've actually solved all those operational issues with the product itself.
Okay, Rick, here's a question for you. Can Worksoft help migrate automated test scripts that were developed using SAP TAL?
Yes. In fact, it can. We should be able to do it exactly the same way we just described. You're going to turn on Capture, begin Capture, execute the test in TAL, and then at the end of the test execution, end Capture. The results show up in Analyze as a business process flow diagram indicating where there are duplications and replications as well as variants to the processes that you've captured, and it automatically generates the test steps from that for Certify so that you have it now converted into Certify. Absolutely the same.
Fantastic. The next question, does this conversion process work for QTP scripts that use descriptive programming?
Yes, it's the same. QTP is just a different name for UFT. It's an older name for the same thing. Yep.
Fantastic. So can Certified be used to test apps besides SAP? I know we've been talking a lot about SAP, but
Yeah, virtually every application in your repository that your company is using or your clients are using in their business today can be tested by Certified.
Yeah, we find people when they think about their end-to-end business processes, they maybe start something on a mobile or a website, go to say Salesforce or customer relationship management, and then pass orders, warehouse management, and transportation management. Sometimes it's different programs themselves. So what we look at is like that end-to-end process, it's basically running on your desktop, right? So we can actually do that end-to-end testing from that perspective.
That's one of the most exciting reasons that people decide to go with Worksoft over other solutions is because Worksoft works the same. Whether you're testing a web application, a desktop application, SAP application, doesn't matter. It works the same. It uses the same interface. You don't have to buy different components. You don't have to learn different techniques. It's the same.
No new programming languages.
No programming involved even to tie those different tests together.
fantastic. And as a reminder, if you do have questions, you can submit them now. We have some great questions coming in. Does Execution Manager provide email notifications?
Yes, you can. Yeah, you have a couple options. Email. You could also email in the middle of a certified process if you needed to. So we'll give you at the beginning, like at the end of the process, but if you wanted incrementals, Certify has the ability to email also. So you can do that.
Okay, our next question, how does Worksoft determine if any changes are made and shown up in which scenarios are impacted?
So that's our impact analysis tool. So when you have a transport in SAP, we know you have transactions, programs, and objects. And so what we do is we run a static code analysis against the SAP transport. And because we have a very rich object library of how SAP windows and screens work, we can correlate that back and then overlay which of your certified processes touch those same programs and objects. So that tells you, so I have a transport, I want to understand the risk of this transport, I'm going to say which of those programs and objects have been affected by the transport. We'll then show you in the UI which certified processes cover those. We'll give you your usage data from ST03 there, and then we'll take it to the next step and we'll show you where your gaps are. So you can actually see if I say maybe have a process with no automation, but I have high ST03 counts, I actually want to go run a manual test on that. So actually last month I did a webinar on this. So if you look on the Worksoft website, you can go replay the webinar on risk-based testing, and it gives you a product demo and a lot of gory details about how that works.
Okay, can Worksoft update Excel files?
Sure. Worksoft, we collect the data that you're creating in your tests into what's called a record set, and that record set can be automatically exported into a CSV file for use in Excel.
So we also have a plugin for Microsoft where you could actually test an Excel spreadsheet.
That's
right?
true. So because that's another product that people use in their integration with SAP, we also test Excel. So if you want to verify that something is in a particular place in Excel or actually plug a data value into an Excel spreadsheet, you can do that directly as well, yes.
Yeah. So if you have manual test steps and you're doing that, you could actually do that all with Certify.
Fantastic. We have time for a few more questions. How many transports can be tested at once using the Impact Analyzer?
So I know internally we're testing in the tens of thousands of transports, so it really doesn't matter. They just, we calculate them and it just keeps calculating. So, you know, if you had, say, 64,000 transports, which is kind of what we run in our test bed, it could take 20 minutes to do the analysis, but it'll work, it's fine.
Okay, and does this process work for SAP HANA as well?
Sure. So there's two answers to that question. One of them is for HANA, which is a database. So SAP GUI sitting on top of HANA is the same as SAP GUI sitting on top of Oracle or SQL Server, and the tests work exactly the same way. So if you're running a UFT test against SAP GUI that happens to be sitting on HANA, that works exactly the same for us in terms of the conversion as though we're running on any other database. If what you're referring to is S4HANA, which is a new user interface against the financial applications for SAP that's also based on HANA. That's no longer operating strictly through SAP GUI. The UFT conversion and replacement program is designed for work today for tests that execute from UFT or QTP against SAP GUI transactions, whether they're standard or custom transactions.
Okay, and we have time for one final question. Will Worksoft Certify only work with SAP GUI, or will it work with any web-based or Windows-based app?
Any web-based or Windows-based app, any Java app, basically any application that you're using in your company today can be tested by Worksoft Certify.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Rick and Chris, and thank you to everyone for attending. If we weren't able to get to your question, we will be in touch with more information. And as we mentioned earlier, we'll be sending a link to a recording of the webinar. If you're interested in learning more about Worksoft, please visit our website. Thank you for your time today. This concludes the webinar. Have a great day.